Welcome to the Engaging Policymakers and Establishing Dialogue Around Research workshop. Today's webinar is a series of annual workshops where we invite local, state, and federal public officials to discuss the importance of research and policymaking. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge Dean Kate Corrigan, who heads the Graduate College, and Dr. Levent Atici, who oversees the Office of Undergraduate Research. We also want to thank the Office of Government Affairs and Dr. Jason Waston for helping make today possible. Today, we are pleased to have Congresswoman Susie Lee, who represents Nevada's 3rd Congressional District, Congresswoman Dina Titus, who represents Nevada's 1st Congressional District, and Dr. Jason Waston, Executive Director of Government Affairs at UNLV. Congresswoman Lee has represented the 3rd District since 2018. Currently, Congresswoman Lee serves on the all-important House Appropriations Committee, where she has been a staunch advocate for investments in the greater Las Vegas community. Congresswoman Titus has represented the 1st District since 2012. Congresswoman Titus serves on numerous committees, including the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. As chair of the Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management Subcommittee, Congresswoman Titus has been instrumental in calling for assistance to local businesses impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. We will now hand it over to our panelists for brief opening remarks, and then we will begin our panel discussion. Congresswoman Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Doctor. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm so happy to be joining all of you in this important discussion. And also, I want to thank Navina and everyone at UNLV who helped put this together. Listen, it's been an exciting week in Washington, a good week for Nevada. We passed the American Rescue Plan, which means about $4 billion for the state of Nevada. And I think that's good news for UNLV as well. You know, anytime there's cuts to our state budget, our education system always seems to be on the cutting block. And so this is incredibly important news. Also included, not just in this package, but in the packages before, additional support for students with student debt. Student debt will remain tax-free from 2021 to 2025. We also announced the suspension of the interest and repayment on federal student loans that will be extended through September 30th of 2021. So very exciting news, in addition to the stimulus check payments that will be coming our way as well. So a lot of good stuff in that package, and I was just happy to be part of that and to be advocating for our state. As we all know, our economy has just been devastated by this pandemic. But most importantly in the plan is $14 billion for vaccines, which to me is our path forward. You know, obviously we have to continue to practice social distancing, and wearing masks, et cetera. But ultimately, our economy gets back together when people feel safe to congregate, whether it's conventions or in casinos or at any of our special events. So I'm looking forward. I'm rather bullish on Nevada getting back on our feet. I think that we always do. We pull back stronger and better than ever, and we're going to do it again. But, you know, I'm committed to our education system, not both higher ed and K to 12. And when we look at these types of crises that we suffer through, Nevada seems to always be at the bottom when it comes to an economic recession. We get hurt more than other states, primarily because we have not diversified our economy enough. And we're so reliant on travel and tourism. And whether it is an economic recession or this pandemic, that's the sector that people cut out immediately. And so it's really devastating for us. Our path to economic diversification runs through exactly what all of you students are doing, which is research at the university, both the undergraduate and the graduate level. I just as background, I grew up in Canton, Ohio. I'm one of 8 children. I put myself through both undergraduate and graduate school. I did a 5-year program. It was my senior year, was my first year of graduate school. And the reason I did it is because of cost. I figured it was one less year of school, one less year of tuition, and I got my graduate degree from that. Obviously, I had to take out student debt, and but you know, at the time, I'm a little older than all of you. We're not going to say what my age is, but you know, students were not drowning in student debt like what is happening right now. And, you know, we had reasonable interest rates for our student debt as well. And so I was fortunate to have that opportunity. But I went to school in Pittsburgh, and it was at the time of the rust bust, I guess. You know, basically all the steel mills were closing. You know, Pittsburgh was really a ghost town, or, you know, it was dilapidated steel mills up and down the river. And it was the universities and the research at both Carnegie Mellon, my alma mater, and the University of Pittsburgh that really transformed the economy of Pittsburgh. And so I am committed and dedicated to helping fight and work so that UNLV and our institutions lead the way for our economic diversification. So I thank you for all you do in leading these students. I thank all of you for being committed to research, whether it's graduate or undergraduate, and I'm really looking forward to having this discussion today.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. Thank you for being a champion of higher education. Representative Dina Titus is going to be joining us a little bit later in a few minutes. So, Jason, did you have anything to add before we jump into our panel questions? You're muted. Oh, yeah, let's unmute Jason.
Jay, we still can't hear you. I'll unmute. I'll mute. Well.
Jason, I just sent you a request to unmute. There you are. There you are. Yes.
Yeah, I kept clicking on mute. But no, the Congresswoman and I actually have something in common. I don't have a lot to add. She covered pretty much a lot that there. It's important, but I put myself through school too, and I'm still paying off student loans. So, but yeah, I think this engaging policymakers and the dialogue is really important. Research at UNLV is super important, and translating that research into economic development and workforce is vital to diversify our economy. I think the United States, you know, we used to be a leader in research, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. And so I think the more we invest, the more it'll be better for all of us. But I don't have a whole lot to add. We can move forward.
Thank you, Jason. So for our first question, I'd like to begin concentrating on UNLV. As an R1 institution, research is central to UNLV's academic and community footprint. How can students, faculty, and administrators communicate the practicality of their research to elected officials and ensure that the public policy outcomes are based on scientificity rather than unscientific politicized attitudes and beliefs? Congresswoman, would you like to get us started?
Here we go. Listen, this is an incredibly important question. First and foremost, I am always a proponent of researchers getting out from behind the desk and getting out into the community. And whether you're doing research on renewable energy, or you're doing research on the impact of COVID on the Asian American business community, or you're doing research on you know, small businesses, et cetera, getting out and actually seeing them. And then in terms of making your research impactful, really, to me, it's about amplifying it. And one, you know, I have a legislative team. Nabil Alam is my legislative director. I have several members of my team. You know, Sending your research to us is always important for us. It's good data point, especially if it's in respect to the issue areas that I'm working on. As you know, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I serve on the Energy and Water Subcommittee, the Interior Subcommittee, as well as Military Construction in VA. Prior to this, in my last term, I served on the Education and Labor Committee, as well as the Veterans Affairs Committee. And so any area that touches any of those, not just those areas, but important for me to have that information. And listen, you know, in today's world, it is highly politicized. Social media, the algorithms of social media make it so that the more provocative you are, the more you get amplified. And so how do you break through with scientific data in that world? You know, to me, I think it's about packaging it as well. And remember what you're competing with. You know, you're competing with provocative content. And so always thinking of how can I make this research understandable to the most common person who may not be educated in this field, I think is really important on getting that information out. But I say never be afraid to communicate with your policymakers, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, or the local level. I think it's incredibly important. And by the way, many of my ideas that I have for legislation come from conversations I have with either researchers or advocacy groups, or, you know, like veteran service organizations, my constituents. That's where I get my ideas on what's not working and what I need to change. And I'm just going to wrap up with one thing, is also find organizations that can help amplify your work. So, you know, if you're doing work on school nursing, you know, there's an organization of school nurses. Make sure you're working with their, you know, you're sending their information to their government affairs team. Even get on their Twitter and social media and post your research on that. You know, there's ways where you can be aggressive about amplifying your research on these platforms. And, you know, it's just really as simple as going on and posting your paper or whatever on those different platforms.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. We actually have Congresswoman Titus that just joined us. Welcome, Congresswoman Titus. We were actually on our first question, so allow me to re-ask this question to you.
Okay.
As an R1 institution, research is central to UNLV's academic and community footprint. How can students, faculty, and administrators communicate the practicality of the research to elected officials and ensure that public policy outcomes are based on scientificity rather than unscientific, politicized attitudes and beliefs?
Well, it's a challenge. Right now, we've just survived 4 years of an administration that did not believe in science and was very anti-intellectual, and half of our Congress, not quite half, thank goodness, has that same attitude. So it's harder now than ever before. I don't know if your students know or not, but I spent 35 years teaching at UNLV in the political science department. So I have great respect for what y'all do, and I've maintained really good relations with the university. For example, some of the things that y'all have been doing that inform my policy making or give me direction on where we should be putting resources are what the Brookings Institute is doing. Very respected scholars at the Brookings. They look at all kinds of social issues like housing, economic development, education funding. That's always a very good source for me. In addition, the engineering school has been very helpful in some of our smart streets, for example, how to construct transportation programs that are sustainable. Dr. Beam in the engineering school, who is an expert in solar energy, some of you may have taken his classes, is a longtime friend, and he's always given me advice about that. That you have a department there that looks at homeland security and cybersecurity, very important issues, that what you are doing helps us to make decisions to improve situations, not make them worse. I would say, though, that what you want to do to have scholars look at, have scholars heard, but have policymakers look at your research is to be relevant. I think of the Big Bang Theory, and I think of Sheldon, who's doing theoretical physics. Well, that I don't need theoretical physics to make policy, but if you can translate that into something everyday people can understand and may affect their lives, that's what will make a big difference. Also, when you come to us to share your research on whatever issue it is, I don't need to understand all the details of microbiology. I just need to know how that research helps us to get a vaccine. You are the expert on the science of it, or the historical background of it, or the details. Give me what I need to make policy that affects my constituents. And if you put it in those kind of terms, a policymaker is going to be much more likely to listen to you if it affects their constituents, if they can understand what you're talking about and translate that not only to their constituents, but to the press. Remember, they can be a partner with you in this, but they can also be an enemy. And the university has a problem sometimes being too much in the ivory tower. A lot of people, I know this from the political science department, they loved writing about elections, but they didn't have much respect for me actually being in an election. So you gotta step outside your comfort zone sometimes from that ivory tower and get out there where your research will be read by more than just a few other scholars and will be used in a way to make progress or solve a problem or inform a policy. And I think that's really the key to whether you're talking to the county commission or the legislature, or you get invited on the 6 o'clock news to address some crisis that's happening that you are the expert on. If you put it in those terms, I think it will make a difference.
Thank you, Representative Titus. Dr. Waston?
So I would just say that our office is always happy to help faculty, students, and administrators. I'm happy to read through all the 100 pages of research and help them condense it down so it makes sense for policymakers. That's why we're here. And we'll help them to partner with people in the community and partner with other people throughout the United States to come up with ideas and issues. Right now, one of those issues I'm working on is in engineering with Dr. Zhuzhan Wang, who's actually come out with a COVID detector that's an electronic about the size of a cell phone. And I've been connecting him with national labs. I've been connecting him with all kinds of different people in the community. He's working with the Clark County Fire Department, trying to get more testing done so that he can prove that it works. He knows that it works, but he needs more data to prove that it works. And he needs some money, possibly, if he finds a national lab to get some of that testing done. So, our office kind of goes above and beyond your traditional government relations. We want to connect with the community, the state, and the federal government and get everybody collaborating and working together. We really do try to listen and not just, tell you what we want to see from the university, but, from the ground up, listen to students and faculty and help them get their proposals out there.
If I could just interject, Dr. Watson, your office does a really good job at that too. We always appreciate you connecting us with scholars who are working on projects that we are working on. And the relationship goes both ways, because sometimes when your scholars are looking for grants, we can help with that through letters of endorsement or tracking a grant or helping identify money. So it really is a good symbiotic relationship. And I thank you for what you and your team do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Waston. So for our next question, is geared toward our two public officials. How do you incorporate research into your decision-making process during committee tasks and floor votes? Relatedly, in areas where there is growing consensus among researchers, how do you balance the research with constituent interest and special interest? Representative Lee?
Thank you. Listen, everything I do, whether it's with my committee work or analyzing votes, or whether I'm going to sign on to a bill or a letter, really comes down to connecting it back to my district and my constituents. But especially when it comes to committee activity, it's so important that we have a data-driven process. And basically everything we do. I just had a committee hearing on water infrastructure around the country. It went from anywhere from dealing with ports to dealing with the Great Lakes with algal blooms to dealing with water scarcity and drought conditions, which is what we're doing in the Southwest. And so it really relied on research, on what is being done, to what research is driving innovation on how we handle those particular areas. And, as a member of appropriations, it's really about how we're going to continue to fund that research, or how do we fund the development and implementation of what we find, or what is the best practice or the best way to deal with a problem, whether, and it can range from anything. And so incredibly important. I personally try to, when I'm in a committee hearing in dealing with an issue, I always try to tie it back to my district. So my district staff is in touch with members of the community. My legislative team in Washington will have a powwow with them, just so we're making sure that we're remaining relevant to our constituents, but also my job is to represent them in Washington. So making sure that I'm the voice of what's happening on the ground here in DC.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Untitled?
Well, I think what I do is make it clear to my constituents that I believe in science. And I guess it comes from being a teacher. When somebody asks me a question, I don't say I'll get back to you or try to fudge. I tend to answer the question as best I can. Now, in politics, sometimes that can be a mistake, but I found over the years that even if people disagree with you, if they think you're telling them the truth and giving them the facts and being transparent, they're more likely to respect you and trust you. So that's what I try to do. I try to be as informed as possible, doing my homework from the research that y'all do, and then tell it to my constituents straight up, whether they agree with the policy or not. But I can think of some examples over the years where believing in the science really made a difference. And certainly we can move back in time, but COVID is one of those areas. Now, here in Nevada, there have been some people who think wearing a mask is a political statement as opposed to just common sense and what all the healthcare advisors tell us is smart to do, because it keeps us safe and the people around us safe. So that's the message that I'm putting out. I'm leading by example. I'm wearing a mask. I'm getting a vaccination. I'm trying to do distancing. I'm not going to parties and weddings and things like that. So it's not just do as I say, but do as I do. And I think people kind of respect that. Another issue that you going to have some political disagreements on, but comes back down to the science, is climate change. If you can talk about climate change to your constituents, even those most partisan or most skeptical, and relate it to them and give them the hard facts and the numbers, and not just try to be hedge on the hedge and, well, maybe this, maybe that, then people will respect that. And I think you are more effective at getting your message across. Another one that I worked on that falls into this category is the impact of radioactive fallout from testing at the Nevada test site. You know, for a long time, they said, well, you can be safe, duck and cover. Well, it's duck and cover and kiss your ass goodbye. You got to know the facts and be able to understand the dangers. And once you start to get that information out, which is based on research, but it's true, it's straightforward, it's factual, not opinion, but fact, then I think you can win some over and bring some of your constituents around. But I don't think you should ever give up the truth or the science in order to accommodate constituent beliefs, because often today people say, well, that's your opinion, but no, it's not your opinion, it's the truth. Used to be, they'd say you're entitled to your opinion, but not to the facts. So I think that's the key, telling the truth, being transparent, backing up what you say with good hard numbers and research, and you'll get through to your constituents.
Thank you, Representative Titus. For our next question, I'd like to bring in the Office of Government Affairs, Dr. Wasden, and begin with him. How can students be more impactful about the issues that they care about? Is the conventional way of writing to your elected official less effective during the digital and social media age? Dr. Wasden?
I don't know that it's less effective, but we definitely have new technology that helps us assist and connect. I've never met any of our offices in Nevada that aren't interested in hearing from students. So they're always willing to hear what the students have, and they realize that students, have ideas that maybe some of us don't have because we have some preconceived notions about things, and they're just investigating and learning and growing. So, I definitely encourage students to even connect with our office and, talk about what we can do to help them. I mean, I don't limit good ideas. Good ideas don't just come from faculty, they come from students, and faculty oftentimes will tell you that they learn from their students when they teach a class. So, I would strongly encourage students to engage with us. My door is always open. I had a student just pop in, was it 3 years ago, and he walked into my office and he sat down, he looked totally lost, and I said, "How are you doing?" And he's like, "We're just trying to get to know faculty." It turned out he was part of a student organization on the UNLV campus, and then I ended up being their faculty advisor after that. So, I definitely encourage students to come by. I try to be welcoming and open to everybody, and if I'm not busy, you're always welcome to do whatever you need to do and come to the office, and I'll help guide you and direct you. I love working with students. So.
Thank you. Representative Lee?
I think I touched on this in one of my earlier questions, answers. To me, it's really important to engage in a variety of ways. And it's important to me to always hear from my constituents. And that's either through a phone call to my office or an email. And trust me, my office, I'm sure Congresswoman Titus does the same. We track every time someone calls my office about what topic. And, if you have a research idea, it can even go a step further in directing it towards my legislative committee or my legislative team so that it's flagged for them. And also, I just feel like I said before is it's important to enlist advocates alongside you. And, you can communicate with me, but if you're doing research on housing or you're doing research that impacts a certain community, reach out to that community and find out who are the important advocacy groups within that community, and let them know about your research, because it's not just your voice then they can amplify it and use your research in their advocacy. And never be afraid to speak up. That's one of the great things I love about this state is you can show up and speak up and your voice will be heard. And so I think it's important just to make sure that you're using all avenues available. And listen, social media has its pluses and minuses, obviously. I mean, it has a far reach. And so I would obviously not shy away, but use it to your advantage.
Thank you. Representative Titus?
Yes, I agree. You can write, you can call, you can email, you can text, you can tweet. All of those things will get our attention. And Susie's right. We do track all of that. and we respond to all of it. So don't ever think if you write your congressman a letter, somebody's not going to see it and get back to it. And it's the teacher in me with the red pen. I read all the letters and tend to mark them and edit them and stick in semicolons where somebody's put in a comma. But in addition to that, don't underestimate your power at the ballot box. Students are a force now. Young people are the ones who are really bringing about change. Look at the young woman from Sweden and the climate change. Look at the young people from the school in Florida from the shooting, bringing about gun violence change. It's really in your hands. I mean, it's your world. We're just still kind of walking around in it, as they say. It's your future, and you really are the ones who can get the attention and make a difference. And you can do that through organizing, you can do it through participating in campaigns, and you can do it through voting. I would also recommend to you, if you have a real interest in a certain policy area, you may not be a political science major, you may be an electrical engineer or microbiology or even music. Everything in life is tied to politics. And I would encourage you to think about doing internships. Internships in the local office or in the Washington office give you an opportunity to work hands-on on an issue you might be interested in. Say you are a music major. Maybe you could work on an issue where you do more funding for teaching music in public schools K through 12. There you're putting your knowledge to work to make policy for the member and can see it come to fruition. So no matter what your majors are, internships are a great opportunity. So don't think small picture, think big picture.
Thank you, Representative Titus. As for our next questions, I'd like to begin with Representative Titus and then on to Susie Lee and then Dr. Waston. How has the COVID-19 global pandemic changed the future of governing? Has the pandemic and related crises encouraged or discouraged future bipartisanship? Representative Titus?
Well, I'm kind of a low-tech person myself. I'd rather be sitting in a classroom on the campus with all of you than talking to you on the computer. But the advantage of this virtually is that we can still get together despite the virus, and we can bring people into the conversation who might not could come to the university for a meeting. For example, I recently was part of a meeting with women legislators or parliamentarians from around the world. We could all get together from many countries around the world and have a conversation, and being able to do that in person would be much more difficult. So it has changed the way we do business. I like the personal contact, but I appreciate the advantages that it's brought. As far as the partisanship, I think this makes it worse because you don't have that personal connection. You don't see people to talk about things other than politics. The only time you engage is on a committee meeting or something where you're being adversarial. There are issues that don't have to be partisan. We're talking about a big transportation infrastructure bill coming up. Everybody needs roads and bridges. That shouldn't be partisan. But if you can't sit down and talk about it and kind of hash it out in person, it becomes much more difficult to reconcile. So while I think that we're lucky that we have this technology so we can continue to work during this virus, where you can continue to have classes during the virus, we can meet with people we might not ordinarily meet with, it does create some social distancing that makes it harder to work together, I think, in that personal way that leads to more compromise.
Thank you. Representative Lee?
Yeah, I completely agree with Congresswoman Titus. First of all, doing Zoom meetings means that, normally for me to attend this meeting in person, I'd have to leave from my office, drive there, find parking, meet with you, et cetera. That would take, 2 hours of my time in meeting with you. Now I'm turn on the computer, we're having this meeting. As soon as I hang up, I'm getting on another Zoom meeting. And so it has expanded our reach. I will say, one of the things we dealt with as a challenge, Congress had never had proxy voting. And so this session, we created the rules to allow people, because of the COVID, just the fear of catching it and traveling, so that people were able to have a member cast a proxy vote for them if they were unable to be there in person. And that, has its benefits as well. It really forced Congress to change and adapt to the times. But I will agree with Congresswoman Titus on, a lot of times the most effective time I spend in terms of trying to reach across the aisle, talk to my colleagues about bills or issues that are important, is when we're on the floor of the House, because you'll go to the floor to cast a vote and you probably have another vote that will be cast in like 30 minutes. By the time you walk back to your office, you're going to be walking back. So you end up staying there. And during that time, I come there with a list of people I need to talk to. Now in COVID, we're in groups. So you literally have to cast a vote and then leave. So it really diminished that type of FaceTime. And I think that was a problem. It's starting to come back. I mean, people are starting to hang, people are vaccinated and beginning to be back on the floor, but we still don't have committee hearings in person, et cetera. But, I think when we look globally around this pandemic, there obviously are, much devastation that's been caused by it, but also, we were forced to change the way we do business. Some of it will make us more productive. And so hopefully we will take those pieces that are good and be able to adapt. But ultimately, I'm like Congresswoman Titus. I love the face-to-face. I do miss seeing people in person.
Thank you. Dr. Watson?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that it's changed government. Will it be like this forever? I hope not. I hope we're back to, face-to-face together and working with people and rubbing shoulders and mingling. But at least we know we can do it if we need to. As far as the impact on future bipartisanship, I mean, I just think that's just the way it is. There's partisan politics. There's always going to be partisan politics. There's going to be people who want to focus on partisan politics, and there's going to be people who want to be bipartisan. And I think most people can agree that being bipartisan on a bill helps it move a little bit better. And sometimes you end up with a little bit better bill, but sometimes you can't be bipartisan. Sometimes you have to be partisan in order to get something done. So, I mean, that's just the world we live in, and I accept it and I'm okay with it. And there's things that Democrats can get done and there's things that Republicans can get done. And at the end of the day, we're better if we can work together and get it done. But if we can't, at least things are still moving.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. So for the remainder of this webinar, I would like to have our audience members pose questions. We've received several questions. So I'd like to begin with Carmen. Carmen, if you could unmute yourself and please state your question.
Thanks, Raphael. Can I steal 1 second before I ask my question? I just want to take this moment to thank Susie Lee directly and in person for writing me a letter congratulating me on receiving the Gilman Scholarship. Unfortunately, we weren't in the office, so I didn't see that letter until much, much later, but I am really grateful for your congratulations, and I will absolutely be reaching out with all of our work. Some of my colleagues are here. My question, because of that, we make fact sheets. So the question to both of you is, what type of policy deliverable would be the most useful to you as a legislator in terms of understanding the content, the research yourself, and in terms of sharing it with others? Right? Speaking to that partisanship reaching across the aisle. So would that be fact sheets like we're doing now, PowerPoint presentations, videos with voiceovers? I'm talking about tangible deliverables. Thank you.
I love fact sheets personally. I'm a big fan. I like a one-pager that, but listen, I mean, I'm also a visual learner as well. And so I think being creative, if you can take an issue and do a 5-minute video, explaining it, you know, that's powerful, because not only is it useful to me and my staff, but you can amplify it across social media. So, you know, I think I don't think there's ever too much communication. I think that making sure that you're reaching out, and, you know, I'm happy to share with Jason, Dr. Wasden, I'm happy to share my my staff emails with respect to their specific issue areas, so that you know exactly who to contact. That would be a good way to start as well. So just, you know, never being shy about communicating, I think is important. But I'm loving the fact sheets personally.
Thank you. Representative Lee, sorry, Representative Titus.
Well, thank you. I like executive summaries. I don't need all the backgrounds. Just give me an executive summary, and then if I have more questions, I'll come back to you to get that. But remember, you're I don't know what issue you're working on, but let's say it's housing. And you are all into housing, but remember, I'm getting information on housing, on climate change, on the budget, on the Afghanistan, on, you know, 1,000 things. And so I don't have the time or the ability to delve into it as much as I would like, or if I could on leisure time, or as much as you have. So if you can give me an executive summary, that's very helpful. And then the staff person in my office who covers this area can get back to you for more details. And then that almost always happens. And then once that relationship is established, we may get back to you with questions that you hadn't thought about, and then you can get the information for us, or run something by you. Well, do you think this might work? And then we appreciate your input on whether we're going in the right direction or not, based on the information that you've given us. And I would tell you one thing is, never underestimate the person at the front desk, whether you're talking about your legislator or faculty office or the Congress. That person controls that office. And if you come in being rude to that person, you're never getting in. So always remember, if you want to get to the person who's going to be able to do something for you, be nice to that person at the front desk.
Thank you. And Jason, sticking with this question, has your office relied on one form of deliverable over another? Is there a preference that your office has relied on?
We definitely use a lot of fact sheets. I mean, if there's video, we share video. The reality is some people are really good at animation, and these little animations that you can explain things in 2 minutes are kind of nice. But, you know, I'm more of a kinesthetic learner, so I'm more like hands-on. I want to be able to touch something. So I just think the more ways you can engage people, everyone learns different. Some people, like, you know, Representative Titus likes that executive summary, and Representative Lee likes the bullet points and fact sheets. Like, everybody's a little bit different. So I think having different materials helps for different people. So, you know, I personally like the fact sheet, because a lot of times faculty or students will give me like a, 50-page paper. And so if they can, sum it down to one page, that's helpful. It's hard to get them to do that sometimes, but, the more we can do that, the better.
Thank you, Dr. Wasden. Our next question, we'd like to turn to Robert. Robert, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about really how research gets into bills when they're being drafted. I'm just curious, especially for the Congresswoman, if you ever seek out researchers or organizations that connect researchers with law writers, or if researchers are expected to lobby you and give you the information that they want you to see. And thank you for your time. And I just want to throw in that I've been represented by each of you at one point or another, and I'm proud to have you represent me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dina, do you want to answer that? I'm happy to answer it.
Okay.
First of all, there's different ways that we seek out information. One is we'll have committee hearings. So, like I said, we just had a committee hearing on water issues and interior we're going to have a hearing about arts. Arts is covered under the Department of Interior, under my committee. So we're going to have a hearing on the impact of COVID-19 on arts organizations. And with that, we will seek out experts. So it's like, and there are times when, as a member, Dina is the chairwoman of a subcommittee. She decides who her witnesses are. But there are times when I can ask the chair, hey, I have this research that's being done at UNLV, and we're going to have this hearing. Is there a possibility where I could get that witness, that witness from my district? Another area is we have caucuses. Dina's the head of the Travel and Tourism Caucus. I'm a member of it. There's opportunities for you to present your research there. I will, or I'm in the New Dems Caucus, which is 100 people. We invite experts in all the time on a range of issues, whether it's immigration or trade or climate change. So there's many opportunities where we seek out the research to be presented. And so I just say, again, have constant contact with us. Make sure that we know, in preparation for this, I just got on and looked at the Spectra magazine that lists all the research that's going on at UNLV. I will use that now and, look at that as I'll read it every now and then to see what's going on. But we'll work with Dr. Wasden. It's really important for us to make sure that we're getting Nevadans national exposure. So we're happy to get you as a witness or as not even just formally testifying, but coming to a caucus meeting or presenting a paper is really important. So there's many ways that we can do that.
Thank you. Representative Titus?
I think Susie summed it up. That's exactly right. We seek out experts to serve as witnesses. We have roundtables. Sometimes we just want a personal opinion on how some legislation is being drafted, if they have some suggestions that make it work better. So like I said before, it's definitely a two-way street.
Dr. Wasden?
I've experienced both. So, we brought things to them, but we've also had them reach out to us. One of the projects I worked on is called, it's a little confusing, it's called the Nevada RTC, but it's not the Regional Transportation Commission. It's actually a solar project that's a collaboration out in Henderson. And on that one, I actually had people reach out to me, and we pulled a lot of people together. We had representatives meet out there from the federal delegation as well as the state. And we had Southern Nevada Water Authority, NV Energy, a whole bunch of people. We're trying to kind of keep this facility moving and going forward. So yeah, it's worked both ways. And I've had offices reach out to me and ask if I could connect faculty to come and testify on issues. So definitely it goes both directions.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Christian Damianos. Christian, if you could unmute yourself and ask the question. Christian, we can't hear you. I think you have a mic.
Sometimes a little thing should pop up on your screen. That's what happened to me.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Always happens. So annoying. Anyway, my name is Christian Damianos. Thank you for letting me ask a question. I hear all the time about people in politics asking for younger people to kind of step up, give their opinion, and kind of speak for themselves on issues that, well, we're all passionate about. I kind of want to take like a bit more of a strategic approach in this question and asking, like, what are some policy areas that you all feel that there is not enough voices from young people? Where do you wish young people would be speaking more about particular issues because you feel that we're absent from those?
Titus, can you get started? Oh, sorry.
Well, the two I mentioned where y'all are speaking up a lot and it's most valuable is gun violence and environmental change or climate change or global warming, whatever you want to call it. You've been very powerful voices. in those areas. I would say one place where you could make a difference is in the workforce issues. We hear all the time, there are so many jobs out there looking for people to fill them in the high-tech fields or in the STEM fields or in the cybersecurity fields. And it would be nice to have input from you as students of, is your education relevant to getting those jobs? How do you go about getting those jobs? How can you work with people who are doing training for somebody who wants to leave one kind of job and move into that more lucrative field? I mean, this is your future, and you shouldn't wait till you graduate to kind of figure out what you're going to do. So having you weigh in earlier about what you need to be successful in those kind of jobs in the global marketplace, I think would be very useful.
I'm just going to add to that on two areas that I think are very important for our community. One is housing. I'd love to, we have an affordable housing crisis in Southern Nevada. I imagine most students are feeling that crisis, and not just that, as you begin to plan for your career in your future and hopefully buying a house. That's an important issue for young people. I'd like to see a younger voice to that issue. And then obviously immigration reform. And it's not, we hear a lot from our dreamers in Southern Nevada, but it's also about our families and family reunification. And, if you're from an immigrant family, the experience that you've gone through. And, it's important as we look to, we're looking at a comprehensive bill right now that is floating. There's actually 3 bills that we're possibly considering here relatively quickly. One is a comprehensive package. Another one deals with farm workers. And then another one is a dreamer's fix. And so, I think that in that whole context, your young voices are important. And then finally, Congresswoman Titus touched on this earlier, voting access and, voting rights. And, you are our future. You should, have a voice in making sure and being active and getting people out to exercise their right to vote, because as we have seen in this last election, it does make a difference when young people get out and vote.
I'd like to go back and add to what Susie was saying about immigration. I think it is young people who are driving that debate. You think about the dreamers, the DACA recipients, these organizations like Make the Road, Dream Big Nevada, those are all run by young people. So I think you are the ones who are leading that debate already. And you are bringing your family along, because many people come from mixed status families. Somebody in the family will be TPS, somebody will be a citizen, somebody will be a dreamer, somebody will have a green card, and somebody won't even know what their status is. So all of that combined, your grandparents may not know how to interact with the system, but you do, and you take them along. You take them to the polls. You give them information. You translate for them. So I think the young people are already doing that in the field, in the immigration field.
Thank you. We actually have time for one last question, and I wanted to have April ask the last question. April, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, hi. My question is for each of the panelists. I'd like to know, when it comes to research, what's more important to you, or what's more impactful? Is it quantitative research, where you're interested in the numbers, and what the numbers say about an issue? Are you interested in the lived experiences or what's happening out and about in the community or regarding that issue? Or are you interested in both? Like, what type of research is most impactful when you're seeking research to make decisions about policies and so forth? Thank you.
Representative Titus, get us started.
Yeah, That's a really good question. And I think the answer is both, but this is the way I would do it. If you are giving the information to me, I want it to be quantitative. But then when I take it and give it to my colleagues or to the press, I want it to be qualitative. Nothing is more compelling than to hear someone's story. So I can give the numbers and then you can tell the story. And that personal interaction and that personal story and that relating to the district is what will change people's minds. And then the numbers that you have given me will back that up with the facts. So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch, and both are valuable and in that context.
Thank you.
I completely agree with Congresswoman Titus. I think it's both. Obviously, you want to back up qualitative with quantitative. I'll also add that, sometimes things start from a qualitative angle. You're identifying something that is happening, and then you just don't have enough data, or it's just not prevalent enough to be able to prove it quantitatively. And so it's important to, pay attention to the qualitative, and then, think of ways that you can translate it into quantitative so that can be used. Because ultimately, whether it's I'm advocating for something that's impacting my community, I have to be able to convince 434 other people that it's important to them as well. And so the data is important to do that. But I think, as Congresswoman Titus said, everyone can relate to a story, and everyone, we represent vastly different communities across this country. But I venture to say that everyone can relate to those stories, that they know that there's at least someone like that story that exists in their community. So, very important to have both.
Thank you. And Dr. Wasden, does your office have a preference for one over the other, or maybe the mixed approach?
I prefer mixed methods. I agree that we need both. Sometimes the issue you're dealing with lends itself better to one or the other, but you definitely want to have both. I mean, if you're focusing on quantum computing, I'm not sure how many people have a lot of experience with that, because we haven't come that far yet. So it might be more data, less qualitative. But if you're focused on, I don't know, some other issue like human trafficking, those stories are going to say a lot to people.
Thank you. Well, this wraps up our webinar. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time and attending this webinar. I would also like to give the panelists the opportunity to provide closing remarks, if they have any. Representative Lee?
Well, no, I just want to thank you. I think this was an important conversation. I want to thank Congresswoman Titus. Obviously brings a great perspective as a former professor to her work in Washington. But I want to thank all the students, and for what you're doing for our community, for being committed to your studies and your research, and being creative about how we communicate and how we get that research out and impact policy and impact change. And I'll just end it by saying, please stay involved, get out from behind your desk. If you're studying something, get out into the community and touch it and feel it, and that will give a lot of context to what you're researching. But thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Wasden. And it was great to see everyone virtually.
Representative Titus?
Well, I thank you too. This is great. I miss seeing students, so this is a real treat for me to be kind of in a virtual classroom again. And you're all doing such amazing work. It's all inspiring. I would tell you too that Nevada has a delegation that is easy to get in touch with. It's not like California or New York. Our numbers are in the phone book. We're easy to get in touch with. And we work really well together. Congressman Lee, Congressman Horsford, me, we're in constant communication. And we serve on different but complementary committees so that we cover more issues for Nevada. So you can come at us at all three angles, and together we can maybe, working with you, make something happen. So don't hesitate to do that. Just one piece of advice is get your story straight before you get there. If you're coming in person, orchestrate it like a Busby Berkeley musical. You know, don't come in there and not know what's going on and not know who's going to speak next and flap the papers around and end up telling me one thing and telling Susie something else. Get it down and come in and lay it out, and your compassion will come through, and it will be most impressive. And I think you'll see results of how you too can change the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Titus. Dr. Waston?
Yeah, I was just thank you for this opportunity. I always enjoy participating in this event. And I can tell you that all of our legislators in Nevada, whether they're state, local, or federal, are all very, very accessible. And they want to hear from you as constituents, especially if you live in their district. So I think that this is a great opportunity. I'm glad that we do this, and I'm glad we're continuing it as a series. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, this concludes our webinar. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.